Welcome to On the Entrepreneur's Journey, the show where we explore how founders and leaders build, scale, and evolve their businesses to create lasting value. Today, I'm joined by Zach Benedict, Principal and President of MKM Architecture and Design, an Indianapolis-based architecture firm with 3 offices serving clients across nearly 20 states, primarily throughout the Midwest. Zach and his team have carved out a distinctive position in healthcare and community-based design, focusing on the connection between people and places and how the built environment can improve health, well-being, and the overall human experience. But what I'm especially interested in today is the business journey behind MKM. We'll talk about how Zach went from joining the firm right out of graduate school to becoming president, how MKM evolved from what he described as a 5-headed monster into a more structured leadership model, how the firm thinks about markets, repeat client relationships, talent, and one of the toughest challenges in professional services businesses, which is transitioning ownership without putting too much pressure on the company. So, Zach, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Great. So let's start with your own journey. You joined MKM right out of grad school. You build your career there, and all of a sudden you're a principal, and there are 5 of you, and all of a sudden the gaze turns to you, and they say, we need to organize differently, and we need somebody to really, step up and become president of the firm. And you got the short or the long straw. I don't know what it was, but
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about that evolution and how it ended up with you actually being president of the company.
I would imagine not much different than a lot of service firms. We had 5 principals. For us, that means 5 owners. And, it kind of had an entrepreneurial mindset that resulted in the fact that almost every decision got funneled through a monthly principal meeting, which, at face value sounds really efficient, but, in hindsight probably was fairly inefficient. And that almost every decision had to wait 29 days until we all got back together in the same room to decide what we wanted to do. And one of the things that kind of evolved over the years is as we started to become more successful and grow, our competition changed. We were a small boutique design firm of about 35 people. We consistently compete against firms that have 1,000 plus employees. And what we found is, one of our differentiators should be nimbleness and speed, but making decisions one day out of the month when we got together isn't a recipe for speed or efficiency. So in kind of trying to figure out how to leverage some of those differentiators, we had a strategic plan in 2022 or 3, I forget now. And one of the things that came out of that was in doing a kind of a cohort analysis with a strategic planner. He had mentioned that of all the AE firms that he worked with, we were one of the few that still had kind of what he called a 5-headed monster and not a more hierarchical structure for, executive and operational decisions. And kind of the way we've made decisions for the last 45 years, we thought, well, that's interesting. So you're saying we should have someone that we appoint as a president so we can kind of streamline some of these decisions. And he said, yes. And literally within 5-6 minutes after that decision, we had a brief conversation. We cast a vote, and there was my short or long straw.
Yeah, you were voluntold that you were doing that.
And I probably have a personality where I enjoy it. The other thing that it allowed us to do is before that, for the history of the firm, because of the previous structure, each shareholder had kind of their own operational responsibilities. Someone was in charge of scheduling, someone was in charge of business development, and we try to share some of that. And what happened was, we got busy and it became this part-time job you didn't want to go to because you had other things going on. And moving to this structure allowed the other principals to focus solely on market expertise, leadership, and business development, and kind of strip them of the administrative responsibilities, which I think hopefully increased their bandwidth to grow the firm and push it in an interesting direction.
So I'm curious. So they pulled you out to mainly handle the administrative and the operational aspects of the company. So what did that leave the other four principals to do? Did one specialize in business development for all four, or was it everybody did everything in their vertical?
So we're a little unique in the architecture space in that I'm lucky enough to work with a bunch of principals that want to be architects for a living and don't have much interest in giving that up as a day-to-day job. So what this kind of restructuring allowed them to do is remain billable, active, and differentiate ourselves from the competitors with the promise that principals' involvement would be from start to finish of projects, and that they weren't going to walk away and be handed to a more junior staff member or project manager. And because of the amount of repeat work we have, their involvement and intimacy and understanding the client, their needs, and where they're headed, really allowed them, I think, to leverage the amount of repeat work that we've gotten. So this wouldn't be a 3-year statistic, but over the last 10 years, the firm revenue has grown by about 320%. With not adding a lot of FTE, it's expanding some of that bandwidth. The bigger change that happened when we restructured the leadership team was on the admin side. I also wanted to stay involved in projects, so I didn't move to just 100%, overhead or administrative duties. I'm still running projects myself. So we had to kind of restructure and rethink how we were staffing and managing all the operational capacity of the firm in ways that we probably weren't before because we were micromanaging everything.
Okay. So if I were to look at how the firm is structured, you would have a principal presumably at the top of the pod or whatever you might want to call it, underneath which you might have somebody who is design, project management, and so forth, just all the disciplines sort of within that. And then they would work as a team in a vertical. Would that be
No, no. Sorry, we're different there too, maybe. Each one of my principals has a target market expertise. So, I have one principal who's solely dedicated their career to senior living, a few that solely focus on acute care, healthcare design. But the staff underneath them, we have resisted the idea of siloed studios and are cross-trained again across all market types. What we've found is that makes us better in serving clients. So I have clients on a normal day might be working on a public library and an operating room renovation for different clients and kind of have to know all the jurisdictional requirements, codes, and hiccups that might come in those different projects. And what results in that is a really nimble, thoughtful, smart staff that, because we do good public libraries, makes us really good, I think, at rural hospitals and vice versa. So it's been difficult on staff. It's not a place I think that would work for everybody, but we think there's a lot of value in resisting that urge to just silo your expertise across all staffing levels.
Right. So it's kind of specialization at the top, but generalization across the industries that you're in. And I want to get into that because, clearly there's some industries that you focus on, and you mentioned a few: acute care, you mentioned senior living, assisted living, hospitals, and the like. And what I don't hear a lot of is office, which it sounds like really is not an emphasis, and well publicized what's happened in the office market post-COVID. Was this just a lucky decision or serendipitous, or was it a deliberate decision on your part, or was it just matching the expertise of the people you had in the firm that led you to be in those markets, or did you choose them? The healthcare space.
A little serendipitous. We've had a long history of experience and success with healthcare specific, in rural hospitals especially. Separate from that, and at the time completely siloed from that, we had a growing and budding expertise in senior living. About a decade ago, it kind of dawned on us that all of our markets and all the principals' interests, frankly, had something to do with health and well-being. That's serendipitous. I don't think you can claim that was strategic at all. But when we kind of had that aha moment, it really turned how we thought about the firm upside down. So, it's evolved the mission in a way that now I will tell you that the firm only works on projects that we think will impact community health and well-being. That ranges from housing, affordable housing, senior living, public libraries, schools, offices, all the way to healthcare, but only in search of clients that are interested in how their projects can impact the health and well-being of the community. So if, for instance, a corporate client wanted to design an office and his sole purpose in life was to try to figure out how that building can make his staff as healthy as possible, I'm in. I'd be interested in talking about that. If you need an architect to try to test fit some, commercial office space fit outs for a realtor who's trying to sell it to a corporate tenant, that's probably really good work, and we probably wouldn't be interested.
Mm-hmm.
So that focus has kind of allowed us not to narrow the project, but the client.
Right, right. And then, that sort of leads to the next question, which you had mentioned that you have a very high, roughly 85% of your work is repeat business, which obviously means you struck a chord with those clients around this concept. And, it's kind of a remarkable indicator of trust in you. And how, does that concept lead to this type of repeat business retention rate?
I think so. I hope so. We spend a lot of time making sure that in the decisions we make, we're prioritizing partnerships over projects. In our industry specifically, but I'm sure like many others, it can be easy to get in the habit of thinking you're surviving from project to project, and making decisions to ensure a project by itself is successful. We try as best we can to resist that urge and focus on the fact that we're trying to cultivate long-term partnerships with clients, and measure the success of those partnerships based on the totality of the projects we're helping them with, not get hung up on the success or performance of a specific project. And when you have enough across different clients over years, I mean, we have some clients we've been working with for over 35 years continually. You measure that by the value of the partnership, not just the project. So it changes, I think, how you approach staff development, but it also changes how you approach, ROI of how you're spending time, from business development to training to client satisfaction. And that's really, as a service provider, that's where we think our true KPI should rest, is in that satisfaction and trust that we cultivate with clients, not necessarily just the financial performance of a singular project.
Right, right. So, I mean, to be, that could lead to some great projects, but it probably can mean you got to take a couple for the team that maybe are a little bit outside of your wheelhouse, but in maintaining the relationship and knowing that you're going to get the next good one, you might, work on something at a skinnier margin, or have it be less attractive for you.
And we would tell a client that we consider a partner, any project you need our help on, the answer is yes. So, we have one healthcare system in the Midwest. Over the last 8 years, we've done over 400 projects for. Now, those projects though range from brand new buildings to, door replacements. And we won't say, well, that's too small, we don't do that kind of thing. If I can help and you need my help, we're here. And that is also a thing that not all staff are geared towards, not all cultures, I think, can do well. And we've tried as best we can to position ourselves that when we say that, we mean it. And if we can add value to a client trying to achieve a specific goal, then we'll do our best to make sure that happens.
So we haven't talked about this, but I'm just thinking out loud. Do you feel that the margin or the return that you get on your work in this model is industry leading, or do you feel like is there any compromise on the profit side to this model, or do you think it actually there's a positive upside to it?
If I base it on standard industry trends, the answer is exponentially yes.
Okay.
Which is fine. I think that's probably a combination of a lot of different variables. One is cultivating long-term relationships with clients. There is a speed to that trust that's efficient. Separate from that, we have the luxury of a combination of really good clients that are institutional in nature, pay well and timely. Like we don't have to worry about that kind of problem that a lot of
Mhm.
my peers do in different markets. Like my aging report might be two clients. It's not. I don't have 50% of my clients with invoices out 120 days. That just doesn't happen for us.
Mhm.
And then separate from that, because of the unique branding and focus of the firm, I also have the luxury of having really smart employees that can make decisions quickly, effectively, efficiently. And we're not finding ourselves during construction dealing with a bunch of issues, errors, omissions. That's just never been part of the stress of the management of the firm. So the combination of those two can result in, fairly profitable practice.
Yeah, well, you get efficiencies when you have familiarity, let's face it.
Right.
And if you know who's in the room on the other side of the table, or even on the same side of the table, it's
Yeah.
a big plus. Um, you had mentioned that a lot of the professional services firms have this problem too, which is your constraint, which is not really demand, but it's finding the right people. And
Mm-hmm.
talent is, you mentioned a couple of times, is such a challenge in your business. So how are you developing younger architects or your emerging leaders so you can beyond, so more responsibility can get delegated down and you stay efficient?
Well, if I knew the answer to that, we'd both be rich, I suppose. I mean, it's an interesting um, kind of time for us as a firm. We made a concerted effort to invest in younger staff about 2 years ago. On average, it's the youngest our team has ever been in the history of the firm is right now. So it's been a interesting learning curve for us as a company to try to understand how to engage, train, inspire, and really challenge a younger profession that is in an industry that I think is having its own midlife crisis. So to try to understand how to teach them to do this well, knowing that the rules are constantly changing, is interesting. Everything from AI to the construction industry to inflation, like all these kind of things are a moving target.
Mm.
So staff development, I think the biggest benefit we've seen is trying to understand how to invest in younger staff's, um, for lack of a better term, emotional intelligence and ability to solve complex problems, right? The critical thinking side of our profession probably has the highest ROI in younger staff, and try to figure out how to provide a culture in-house that serves as a safety net as they get through 10,000 hours in practicing how to do that well, allows us to put them in positions that without it, they're probably a couple of years away from doing, where with it, they might be a couple months away from being ready for it. So a lot of the in-house stuff that we try to manufacture in terms of discussions and workshops and training are all geared around trying to provide this safe place for younger staff to gain experiences so that when they leave the building, they feel a little bit more equipped and familiar with what those situations might entail. So that has become the challenge is we've noticed that we need to fabricate more and more of those types of situations and opportunities than we probably did in the past, partly because the market and industry is changing, but more because we're just more invested in trying to figure out how to expedite the learning curve of staff in a service industry that, is tough and unforgiving to younger talent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think everybody is realizing there's a lot of portability, I think, in that younger generation, in that they jump around a little more. I mean, you can go from
Mm-hmm.
anywhere from college sports where, you know,
Yeah.
there's a portal and kids are using it a lot. And I think the average, life or number of jobs by the age of 30 or 35 is has gone up a lot. So you really have to both hire that talent and then retain them. And it sounds like you've made a dedicated training push to give them quicker, get them to 10,000 hours quicker and hope that that is a retention tool that gets them responsibilities quicker, which makes them want to stay and therefore you can perpetuate the firm. And I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Well,
So,
the service industry is weird because it's hard, I think, to even pretend to master academically. You almost, we compare the operation of the firm like a teaching hospital. Like, I got to help you. I'll show you how to do it, but then you're going to do it in front of me, and I'm going to watch. None of our principals have private offices. There's nowhere to hide. You see conflict resolution in real time. So it becomes a place where you have to be an incubator of experience. And the more you can expose the whole office, I think, to the challenges and problems you're getting paid to solve, the faster I think you'll see that development happen. At least for us, that's been true.
okay, and translates into retention or at least that's the thought.
And opportunity.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and opportunity leads to retention too. Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. I'm understanding that. So, tacking away a little bit, as you mentioned earlier, you're a 45-year-old firm, which means that you've had to deal with succession issues, ownership issues, private company perpetuating it requires people retiring and new people coming in being principals. And it's one of the hardest issues in a service business is how do you transition an owner who's put a career in and brought a lot of value to the firm without putting financial pressure on the company. So, how have you done it? I've found your solution to be a good one in that it balances the perpetuating of the firm and the balances the need to compensate the outgoing part principals. And could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, with the disclaimer that I know I'm spoiled when it comes to this, because I talk to peers, and this is usually the number one thing they're worried about. And for us, it has traditionally been the least stressful part of the firm's management. So maybe let me know where you want this to go, but we have been over the years very prepared and prescriptive on how we think ownership transition should occur, to the extent that when a new shareholder comes on board, they have a clear understanding objectively on what additional shares will become available when and who's divesting in what calendar year. It might happen faster than that, but at least you know how slow it might happen, so you can at least decide how patient you want to be or not. And I think that's kind of limited the stress of that. The other thing that we do that I think, credit to the legacy principles at our firm is, we have made the concerted effort, at least for internal shared transfers, that we clearly undervalue the firm in a way that doesn't make that burden so hard for future shareholders to come on board. And what it has done is I think it's cultivated a very stress-free, for lack of a better word, at least financially, ability to transfer that leadership and predict that it won't be a volatile transition when people retire. We've had two legacy principals retire since I've been here. We miss them. It's not that, but was no financial hiccup to the firm. Probably more of a messaging and marketing thing than it was a financial burden. And the real work to make sure that has been smooth, I think, was in how people were onboarded as shareholders, not how they exited. So I frankly don't really know how others do it. Since this has worked with us so well, I haven't researched really any interest to figure it out. But whenever I talk to someone, I can tell how stressful what seems like to be the ambiguous nature of that might be. Ours is everything but ambiguous. And I think it's a testament to, the original majority shareholder, the partners, that they were very open and transparent about what that might mean to future owners of the company. That you could have a predictable path early on to understand, what that might look like in the future, and you didn't have to find yourself shackled by a non-compete or golden handcuffs with not knowing really where this was headed. That's never been the case for us.
Yeah, yeah. And the other side of that is it puts a growth imperative on the company
Yeah.
to really devote some cash flow to less productive resources, which
Yeah.
is the paying out of dividends or however that's structured, to former ownership that's not really contributing. And so it puts pressure for growth. It can put financial cash flow pressures. And so I deal with it all the time, just to let you know. So I'm very interested in that. Um, so there's a lot going on in your space. You mentioned a midlife crisis, which I assume means the midlife crisis that the world's going through, which with AI, and
Yeah.
how do we incorporate this technology? But um, tell me about your 3-year vision as you look out. What are you looking to do more of the same things? Are you looking to branch into next lane over businesses? What do you see as where do you want to be in three years?
Um, we've actually spent a lot of time in the last 6 months trying to put some structure around that vision. For the last 5 to 6 years, we have spent an inordinate amount of energy trying to make sure we were happy with the culture of the team in-house, right? We're based out of Northeast Indiana. But over the last 3 years, for various reasons, growth, staff relocation, everything in between, we have come to grips with the fact that our future will have to rely at least somewhat on permanent remote employees, or growth outside our original geographic presence, office location. So what happens is, we have been very, very picky about who we let on the team. We affectionately refer to the firm as an island of misfits. I think that's how it best functions. The trick is, you got to find more misfits that like being on the island. And
Mm,
what we found is because of the work we do, the scale of it, the speed of it, the complexity of it, it's just not a firm that's a good fit for everybody, even in the design community. And we've probably saturated the market to some degree in our region. So the trick and the goal for the next 3 years is, we're doing work last year we worked in 17 states. How do you scale that to accommodate the growth that we'll likely see as a company, but retain the commitment to staff who are not only talented, but interesting to work with, because that's really the backbone of the culture. And most importantly, over the next 3 years, we have to figure out how to do that outside the walls of the current office,
mm.
uh, and retain that culture, that curiosity, that commitment to accountability, empathy, all these things that are real hard to do, I think, virtually. It's much easier to do when you're in person, than it will be virtually. So, we've got 3 locations now. We'll likely open another bricks and mortar location in the next year. The next 3 years, who knows? But the trick will be how to cultivate and sustain new and valuable members to the team that we don't get to develop some sense of trust with in person. It's going to be virtual. And for us, that's been the backbone of the firm. And we're going to have to learn how to get over it and do it more virtually, which the last 45 years was not at all the MO of how we cultivated team members.
Yeah. And what that generally requires is not only the exporting of the culture, which I think you're discussing now, but also your processes and procedures and your playbook.
Yeah.
And how do you, there's so much tribal knowledge, and in an office, tribal knowledge can float around the room and people pick it up,
Right.
but it doesn't go beyond the walls in many cases. So those things have to be written down, and they have to be documented, and then they have to be in a way that they can get exported to those other locations. Where are the other locations? I know you're
Right now, it's Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, and Grand Rapids.
yeah.
And then we have remote staff in Southern Indiana, Kansas, some other locations.
Okay, so you're all in the Midwest spot, and then people working remotely. And I
Mhm.
find it's interesting. You can't find enough misfits in Indianapolis, and you have to go beyond the borders. That's interesting. But it's funny. You say your culture is misfits. And then you list your values, which are very straight-laced and not conventional, but they're certainly not. It doesn't say that. It doesn't certainly describe a misfit. So it must be intellectual misfits rather than personal misfits, or something like that.
I mean,
Um,
I think as a service provider, especially within the niche we serve, um, our job is the only product we provide is trusted advice. That's it. I mean, architecture is a really weird profession in that I don't provide clients anything but advice I hope they listen to. It's in the
right.
shape of drawings, but I hope you follow these instructions, but you only do that if you trust me. And a lot of times that trust requires some candor, um, some pushback, some uh, disruptive innovation that kind of challenges the status quo because those are the problems people ask us to solve. And that's where I think it takes a certain professional who's not interested in finding the right answer. They're more obsessed with making sure we're asking the right question. And, that's not every design firm, it's not every service firm. We have found an enormous value in making sure that kind of that misfit allocation is focused on being all right, getting a little awkward if it means we're making sure we're asking the right question. And clients that experience it, I think, really appreciate that we're willing to do that, and we care enough that we're not going to move forward unless we all feel confident that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay. I think that's my role too. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really appreciate that. You're right. Not everybody has that. And some people can acquire it, but you're right. You need that. So that explains the misfit side of things. So if that 3 year sort of vision is out there, what would you say, what would make you say 3 years from now, we did this right? What would be the measurements? What would be sort of the milestones that you would say, um, have to have happened for this for you to say we got to where we wanted to be in 3 years?
I mean that I'm never going to give you the answer you want there, probably. There's the responsible answer, and then there's the real one. So the responsible answer is we're serving more clients in more regions and blah blah blah, which I think is all hopefully true. Um, Selfishly, and I'm saying this as the collective selfish in terms of the team, I think the answer would be success would be in 3 years we're doing nothing the way we're doing it now.
Uh,
And if not, I think we all wake up 3 years from now and feel a little bit like a failure. So that's a culture that I think defines success as continuous improvement. Right? You're not obsessed with getting to be the best. You just want to get better than you were yesterday. But you're looking at like a 3 year horizon. I hope by 3 years we're not doing much the same as we're doing it today, or I don't know what we spent the 3 years doing. So that can feel terrifying to some. The ones that work here, that seems exciting. But I hope in 3 years, we have grown a virtual ecosystem of misfits across the Midwest, but we're not doing anything the way we're doing it today. If so, that would feel like failure to me.
hmm hmm Well, I certainly think none of us know really what that's going to look like, but
No,
I think all of us feel that that imperative is there, and I think even if we truthfully look back as how we were doing things 6 months ago versus
yeah,
today, we would see light years of difference, compared to maybe the prior 6 months when we hadn't really taken advantage of all the tools and started to incorporate a lot of the things that are available today. So I think you're going to be right. And the client relationships and the results that come from that are probably going to be the constant, and how you get there is going to be totally different. And
yeah.
I think that's a great observation. So Zach, this has been a terrific conversation, and I appreciate you sharing your story and the MKM story. Not just the design, but really how the firm is organized, and I think and succession planning is all very instructive. So for listeners, there are a lot of lessons here for professional service businesses, and how to evolve beyond a partner dependent model, and how to choose your markets intentionally, and how to build repeat client relationships, and the next generation of leaders. So again, Zach, thanks for joining us, and thanks to
Thanks for
the
having me.
audience for joining us on the entrepreneur's journey. Thanks again.
Thank you.